I have a covenantal law called Simone here that really dictates. So, all right, let me pray. Thank you, Lord, for this time tonight for study, and thank you, God, for the people that are on the call. I just pray that the Word of God would speak truth to all of our hearts, and that we would learn something, and that we would grow more closer to you, more in love with you, and the story that you've given us for so many years that just continues to transform us. We love you, Jesus, in your name. Amen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I was not on the call last week, but I listened to the call. I saw the call, and Rick was like, wow, this is really hard. There's only 9 plagues. There's not much to talk about. So then I flipped to this week, and I'm like, this is like the pivotal scripture in the Bible for me. And so I'm going, uh-oh. So I guess what I'll say tonight is, what are your questions? What do you guys got? What do you guys have? I'm stoked. So whatever you want to talk about is what I want to talk about.
One thing that came up when I was kind of looking over it again this afternoon that I had missed the first time was how they remembered to bring Joseph's bones back with them when they left. You know?
Bones.
Yeah, like, I mean, I was thinking, you know, that they didn't know if they were going to be let go, you know, and they like their loins are girded. They're like, they got their food like ready to go at a minute's notice. But they take the time to go get Joseph's bones to bring them back with them. And I just thought, I mean, the generational knowledge they didn't forget, you know, from 400 and some years before, they did not forget that they had to bring those bones back. And it just sort of blew my mind.
Yeah. You know, Tim, you think about it, 400 years, I lose things, you know, I found the tickets to the Who concert I went to in 1988, and that was like 30 years ago. Imagine trying to find something 400 years later. And where were these bones for 400 years? Did you think about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like, where
were they?
Yeah, because he was a prized person of Egypt. So I was, in my mind, I was thinking that they'd have been in a place of kind of like reverence for the Egyptians. So they would have had to been like, hey, we need those bones. We got to go. Like, you know.
Have you guys seen the Evidence of Exodus movie?
Evidence of Exodus.
I have not seen that, no.
The Patterns of Evidence
No.
Exodus? Because they actually show an archaeological site that I think was Joseph's burial in Egypt. And it has a giant statue of him, and it's like a little house, and it would have been the compound where he and his family all lived. Like, when I say his family, including his 12 brothers, or his 11 brothers and father and everything during that time period.
Manasseh and all the fun people.
Yeah, his sons from Manasseh, and yeah, Judah, Reuben, all them. So there was this giant compound, and there was this building that looked like it was, it had sarcophagus in it, and it had a statue of him. Or at least it sure seemed to be him, let's put it that way. They didn't say it was, you know, definitively him. It didn't say Joseph, but it was a red-headed Hebrew with a many-colored coat.
It sounds like him.
Yeah.
Hold on. No, hold on. Do you remember the Doors? That's Jim Morrison. That was Jim Morrison of the Doors. That's his bones. Maybe not. All right. So, that's not funny. So, but yeah, Tim, I mean, just to know that, didn't Joseph say in Genesis, you're going to have to, you know, that's kind of my wishes. Just carry me with you, you know, like carry me with you.
Yeah.
That's an interesting wish.
It's surprising that they remember.
But yeah, you're right. Honestly, you know, the Bible oath and the Bible covenant, the Bible ordinance is just so different than 2020, isn't it? Like, I don't know what sort of oaths you guys have taken with your relatives and your, because this would be like, let's say, great grandpa from the Civil War wanted you to keep his sword, right? And you're like, crap, where do I put that sword for the next 150 years? So, but you're right, Tim. That is mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, that's the
That's good.
equivalent of people who came over with Jamestown asking us to do
Yeah.
something.
Pilgrims. That's almost like the Pilgrims, isn't it? A little bit
Yeah.
after the Pilgrims.
Yeah, Pilgrims, Jamestown. Yeah.
Yeah, Jacqueline, that puts some perspective on it. Good grief. Hey, did you guys remember the bones? Wait, what? Shoot, I forgot my keys. But I think, you go from Genesis to Exodus and goes right into and the Israelites got so large, and that's all you get. Joseph dies, right? And there we're at, Joseph's death, and we go 400 years. We flip ourselves to Egypt in bondage, and now we're there. And that's a good point, Tim. Wow. And you forget that piece when you're reading the Exodus story. Wait, when did they add that? They never added that. That was there. So, any other thoughts that you kind of stuck out to you guys? Questions, queries?
One thing for me that's always an interesting
13,
thing
14.
is when he's giving instruction about Passover. And he says to them, this is to be a lasting ordinance for you and all your descendants. And the word there is basically, forever. And so, and there's a number of these
how about
things
not
in the
ever
Bible.
stop that?
Yeah. So, I mean, to think about something that,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's something that's interesting as I read through the Old Testament, that there is a number of things that God tells them that they are not ever supposed to stop.
Yeah, no kidding. Passover's kind of a big deal. Kind of a huge deal, actually.
Yeah. That makes me wonder, why did
in fact, I counted, Jacqueline,
stop it then?
the everlasting ordinance or the ordinance. What?
Yeah, it's
I mean,
that's in Exodus 12:24.
12:24, and then I found that also. You're talking about ordinance 12:24. I found it. I found ordinance 12 verse 4. I found it 12 verse 17, 12 verse 24, 13 verse 10. I found it 5 times. This ordinance thing, this everlasting ordinance.
Okay.
And I think that's, like you said, that's mind blowing to think that, God wanted to have a. Yeah, I found it a bunch of times. I never knew it was there 5 times. I didn't know. I'm using the New King James. I don't know what version. I'm using the New King James here, so I don't know which one. Was I supposed to use a certain version? Or you guys all use NIV? Yeah, NIV.
I've got an NIV.
Mine says, what does yours say? Mine says everlasting ordinance. Does yours say ever, or what kind of ordinance does yours say?
It just says lasting, but I know from the Hebrew that it means that it's supposed to go, perpetual forever.
Oh. Yeah, without end. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's a good question, Jacqueline. Why did we relinquish this ordinance? Did this get missed, in the 1400s or 1200s or so?
And that's something I've seen. There's a lot of them as I've read through the Old Testament where we're told this is everlasting ordinance, and I don't see us doing it,
Yes, I don't disagree with you. And I liked also, if you read through that, I like how God institutes the Sabbath before the 10 Commandments here too, as well. Is this the first moment of you shall not work on that day? No manner of work shall be done, it says in verse 16 of 12. No one. And that's the beginning of the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. But I like that because we haven't even got the 10 Commandments. We haven't even got those yet, the tablets. So.
And that's another interesting one, because how many people keep Sabbath?
Good point. I mean, Jacqueline, you can just make a scorecard for what we're not doing now. I mean, really, you'd almost want to do, what do we still do? No, I mean, seriously, what do we still do do we sing Psalms? I don't think we sing Psalms either. Maybe we do.
Yeah, I think we still sing Psalms. I mean, there's a lot of them in different, yeah.
We do. True. Yeah, that's true. But you're right. That's funny. What do we still do as the church? Anything? So.
And there's a lot of
anything
stuff
else? Because yeah. So we got a lot of what I have this week, guys. It's 12. I mean, there's just so much ground we had to cover. 12 through 14, and then 15 through 17. So if there's anything in there, I don't know, Rod, if you had any questions, or I don't know if you guys. I mean,
yeah,
there's just a lot of information.
One thing I wondered what they meant was at the beginning of 13, where it says consecration of the firstborn, and it says the Lord said to Moses, if I can pronounce the word right, consecrate to me every firstborn male, the first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether human or animal. What did he mean by belongs to me? And then you get further in, and it says in 13:11, it says redeem every firstborn among your sons. And then you get further down, and it says, this is why I sacrifice to the Lord the first male offspring of every womb and redeem each of my firstborn sons. Like, what does he mean by that? Because they weren't sacrificing Israelite babies to God, were they?
No.
So what does that mean?
No, I think. Well, I actually studied that. Okay, just so you know, and what it says in one of my commentaries was when we read the story of the Passover, we begin to understand what may have motivated God of Israel to behave in this way. The simple fact, once again, is that the firstborn is his by fact. A fact stated plainly in Exodus 22:29. He said in that, you must give me the firstborn of your sons. This command refers to both human and offspring animals, as the following verse implies. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. This right extends beyond human and animal offspring to include the produce of land, which that goes into, which is why the ancient Israelites had a feast of first fruits. Everything firstborn belongs to God and must be given over to him. So that was one of the things that consecrate, set apart. That is a good question, because the children whom Pharaoh had killed included the firstborn of Israel. Remember, he was throwing babies into the Nile, and so God was like, well, you know, that's good, and Pharaoh, you think you're God, but I'm actually God, and those are my children, they belong to me. So I think also it refers to that a lot. But those are good questions. It also goes on, but every firstborn of a donkey, verse 13, did you read that part? But every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with the land. So it actually gets even more interesting if you read that. So I don't know if anybody's got any comments, because I thought that was, Rod, I equally thought that was really good. And I was like, interesting, because the firstborn, when God says they belong to me, he means that.
So I think that actually comes.
It also says here we should understand this. Go ahead.
I think that actually comes from Genesis 15.
Abraham, Isaac.
No, it's Abraham's. God makes a covenant with Abraham, and they split the animals in two. And then, so it was a covenant that used to be done, a blood covenant. It was a Middle Eastern blood covenant. And so the covenant was, that you split these animals in two, and then you did a trade of things. So, and one of the things that you traded was your firstborn son. And God says that he made this as a covenant with not just with Abraham, but with all his descendants. And so God, now God didn't have a firstborn son at that point. That didn't come till Jesus. But in preparation for that, the Israelites owed God their firstborn sons. So, but God didn't want to kill them. So he had them redeemed so that they could maintain them themselves.
Yes.
But it was but then he did sacrifice his firstborn son.
You're talking in terms of Isaac. And then, you're talking about
No,
Father God. You're talking about
I'm
Jesus.
talking about,
in terms of Jesus.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's the ultimate. You're right. Yeah.
Right. But the covenant was made with all of Abraham's descendants, and that would have been part of that covenant as the firstborn son being, all of our firstborn sons belong to God, and God's firstborn son belongs to us. Because when they did those covenants, it was firstborn son, it was you exchange your robe and your rings, any significance of power. You exchange your ability to fight, so your weapons. You exchange your names. So Abraham receives a new name. So he's, and then, I don't know, there's a bunch of things that they exchange. So, so that's my personal opinion. I mean, I don't,
I was going to say, I don't know. This says here too, Rod, the point is that the firstborn of every womb belongs to God. But in the case of the Israelites, he will not claim his right fully. A substitute will take their place. So it says it reminds us that God will save his children, his firstborn son, Israel. So basically it's not metaphorical, but and I don't know if if you guys read this, but Israel is the firstborn of God. That's his family. And so Israel's his firstborn son. And then we'll see what happens 1,500 later, like you just said, Jacqueline, 1,500 years later, Jesus is the ultimate. We'll see how clear that becomes when they put Jesus on the cross and they take his firstborn. So it's a pretty good redemption story. Yeah, I agree, Rod. That's interesting stuff. The parallel between the 10th plague and the mention of the donkey too, that part in 13, rather than being sacrificed itself, a donkey is to be redeemed or replaced with the sacrifice of a lamb, just as Israel was redeemed or replaced with the blood of a lamb. So it's interesting how that's added in there. I had never read the donkey part before. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Adding in a donkey there. So yeah. Anything else that was like, There's a lot. There's a lot. We have the Passover. We had the firstborn, the 10th plague, the Passover, the Exodus out of Egypt. 13 with the firstborns consecrated. The Feast of the Unleavened Bread is initiated. That's another ordinance with strict instructions, of course, for unleavened. And then they send them into the wilderness, and then we go into the Red Sea, which is, it's Charlton Heston stuff right there.
One of the things, again, in the Patterns of Evidence movie, the third one that they've done the first part of the third one, but they haven't released the second part, but it's called The Red Sea Miracle. And one of the things that they talk about in there, which I thought was absolutely fascinating and just really, hooked me on it, was they're talking about that a lot of the scholars in that talk about this, being a trip that takes a really, really long time between the going from Egypt to the Red Sea. But they make an argument in there that these people made this trip in 3 days. And particularly where he believes the Red Sea to be, because, Red Sea, the Yam Suf is the actual Hebrew word is Yam Suf. Which, so, where he thinks Yam Suf is over near the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, I think. And so he did a bunch of, research on this thing and says,
who's
these
he?
people.
Is that the producer? Is that the director?
Yeah, Mahoney, Tim Mahoney.
Oh, Tim Mahoney. Okay.
So anyway, but he deals with a ton of different archaeologists and anthropologists, and like one of the people who he went to was, bizarrely enough, he went to Temple Grandin. Do you know who that is? She's a very famous autistic woman. She revolutionized slaughterhouses. But
that sounds awesome.
Yeah, but she is a renowned expert on animal behavior. So that's the reason why she was able to do something like that, because she says because of her autism that she sees things much more akin to what an animal would see it. One of the things he talks about is that animals don't see symbolism; they just see reality. And so, anyways, but so he was talking to her and saying, "Is this something that animals would be capable of doing?" You know, and so but he went to all these different experts to talk to them about it, because he said, archaeologists are saying, well, animals couldn't do this. He's like, well, let's try to talk to someone besides an archaeologist about what animals can do, And she was like, yeah. She's like, if humans could do it, animals could do it. And there's several historical accounts of people in that time period making trips as long, if not longer than that, within short periods of time. So, but it's a very interesting thing because it changes how things are happening. Some of the things that they talk about, where they talk about, did you not bring us on wings like eagles? Or, they talk about how swiftly they were able to go, or things like that, in some of the poetry about that time period. And it changes how you view that they are actually literally talking about what actually happened, that they, were able to just travel these insanely fast paces, which is potentially why Pharaoh would have had to chase them with chariots, because God enabled these people to just do these, massive treks for these long periods of time.
No kidding.
It's a very interesting set of films. I highly recommend them. Again.
Are they on Amazon Prime?
I think, I know the first one is free on Tubi, we found out, which Tubi is a free app, so anyone should be able to get that. And then the second one was, where did we find the second one at, Jody? Do you remember?
You can rent both the first two for like $1.99 or $2.99 on Amazon if you don't want to do Tubi. But I think they're on Prime and Vudu.
And I think you can get the third one as a rental for a digital download off of the Patterns of Evidence website, which I think is Thinking Man Productions. But yeah, if you put in Patterns of Evidence, he has the whole website up, and you can digitally download all of the movies.
Yeah, it's cool.
Thanks for that resource.
The one thing that
they're mind blowing.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing I found, put it in Exodus 12. I don't know if you guys flipped to Numbers chapter 9 when they had their first annual Passover dinner. And I think it's interesting because they do the first Passover in Egypt, in the land of Egypt. They do the second one in Numbers chapter 9 at the base. I think it's at the base of Mount Sinai. Who knows that? In the wilderness of Sinai at twilight. So they actually do it again. So it says in Numbers 9, verse 4, so Moses told the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover, and they kept it. So Moses is pretty good authority there. So they kept it. And they did what they were told. So I think it's interesting. But they did the first one right. I don't know if they had the second one in there. It might have been, Deuteronomy. But I think you're right, Jack. Looking over the years, they got the first few years right, and they got probably doing it in the New Testament. But now that we're in 2020, I'm not sure. Orthodox Judaism probably still carries this for sure. But you're right. Very, very seldom do you hear. But I found that interesting. Numbers chapter 9 it's not really a duplicate. It just has this is what they did on the 14th day. certain men were defiled. So, and then they also talked about bringing strangers into their Passover. This is what you do if you have a visitor, you know. We do Exploration 101. They have another way they do it, you know. This is how we keep a guy clean. This is what you do if he wants to eat the blood of the lamb, you know. It's interesting. So that's what I found in the early part of our reading for this week. I thought that was pretty interesting. So yeah, wilderness, Red Sea crossing. Oh, I found it interesting. Let's see, 13 verse 17. Then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines. Even though I was reading ahead to, was it 16 or 17, that they already got into a fight with the Amalekites, but he didn't want them fighting the Philistines. I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if anybody else caught that. So, but then the verse also says that God, lest perhaps the people change their minds. So he basically leads them into a booby trap, which is the Red Sea. They can't get out of that. I thought that was interesting.
Right. I mean, wasn't that
because that's not the direct route? So
right? Wasn't that his reason to lead them? So when Pharaoh decided to follow him, he'd trap them.
Well, what it is, Rod, is they're going to just go back home. We want to go back to Egypt where we were getting food, we were well taken care of, but we were slaves. That's the whole point, is they still wanted to go back. And every time something went down, they said, you know what, Moses, you really want us to break, don't you? You want to take us out here to kill us. And I like that one. So God led the people by the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. So, and they followed, because it sounds like Moses was a very, very, very good leader. So, and that's when it mentions, Tim, the bones. And that's when it mentions the bones right before they crossed the Red Sea.
Think about the dichotomy there, where you have they literally just got out of slavery. I mean, it's fresh in their minds. They just saw the plagues and what God can do. They remembered from 400 years ago to bring Joseph's bones, but they forget the power of God that was just displayed the day before or 5 days before, and they want to go back to Egypt. So just think about those two things. Like, they can remember 400 years ago, but they forget 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And that should, like, you know, speak to us too. That we can't remember, you know, what happened last week, right?
Right.
We also have lost that 400-year perspective. Like, we don't have either perspective.
We don't.
And so we can look at them and judge them and say, wow, like he literally just like killed all the firstborn and locusts and plagues, and now you're like, go back to being slave. But they still had, despite all this, a strange historical perspective that grounded them as a people. Like they just couldn't forget that part of it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I found interesting in that part. I'm not sure if you caught it, because it says it like 5 times in a row, where it talks about, like, why are you doing the Passover this way? And it says, you're going to do this, and when your son asks you, you'll tell him this is the reason. And every single time it says, remember this day in which you came out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, for by a strong hand the Lord brought you out of the place. And what stuck out to me was that word strong hand. He says it over and over and over again. And it really, after a few times, it said he's really trying to get to these people. Like, this isn't just the God of the Egyptians that can do snakes, you know, or can do crazy weird stuff. This is the strong hand of the Lord that can push the sea aside, you know, like, and to really make it into something that was like, our God is powerful. You know, it's not just something that we do as a people, it's that our God is powerful.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also noticed that hand part too, Tim, you just said, when he stretches out his hand, let's see, I'm in 14, verse 16, 14, 16, lift up your rod and stretch out your hand. But in verse 26, the Lord says, stretch out your hand. So no more rod. You just got the hand. Just put the hand out there. and he just kind of puts the water. It's almost like you see Jim Carrey in a movie, just kind of puts his hand back and it closes up on him. And it's not that easy to close the seat. But you're right. That's a good reminder. Because he does do that a lot. A lot of the visual word things. Yeah, I caught that a lot when I read this here. And when the people went back, when they were startled by the fact that they were caught between the the cloud, and they were panicking because they were getting madmen coming their way. I mean, I just can't imagine that. I just can't imagine the drama that ensued when you have your wife and kids and grandpa and grandma and everybody there, and you look straight ahead, all you have is like this body of water. So when you were just talking to him, I was thinking like, yeah, now what? I know the 10 plagues, that was cool. I know that was a good one. That was very good, God. That was good. I want to just, so he's like, you still don't get it, so I'm going to harden the guy's heart. But I just can't imagine having Melissa and my boys and saying, we're going to go this way. And I'm like, shoot. And it comes down to the faithfulness of God. It really does. So my commentary says, apparently they were quite happy as slaves in Egypt, and their blindness to God's might leads them to think of only two options: slavery or death in the desert. That's the only two. That's the hyperbole. And so they cry. It says they actually cry, which I would have too. If you put me in the desert with unleavened bread, a couple donkeys, and screaming kids, I'm not quite sure what I don't know how you guys would react, but I would probably have a temper tantrum. So.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do in that situation, to be
but
honest.
I'm wondering if they were about to surrender back to the Egyptians. I'm wondering how close that actually came. I mean, the pillar was there. You know what I mean? The surrender, like, take us back. Take us back.
Well, what it sets up for me is that, like, God put them in a place at the Red Sea where there was no way out. Like, so that they had
no way out.
Yeah, there's no way out. And the only way they're saved and they're not back into slavery is if God does a miraculous work. And that's how he wanted it to be. Like, he could have just sent
God shows up.
in.
God shows up.
He could have sent Moses in with an army to take everyone, like raised up an army behind Moses, fought the Egyptians, and brought them out. But that would have seemed like Moses did something. You know, it had to be miraculous.
Yep.
It had to be that there was no explanation for this other than that God and his strong hand is what saved his
But he doesn't.
What's that?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
Did you notice that when in that same thing where he's talking about, you know, the strong hand, this is what he's telling children, it says, it shall be a sign on your hand or as a memorial between your eyes that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. And it talks about this over and over again every time, that your hand or between your eyes, you won't forget what happened.
And then he tells people to bind the law on their foreheads and on their
foreheads.
hands.
Yes.
And on their hands.
Yes, he does. Yes.
So that must be where that comes in. You know, one of the things I was going to say about it, though, is I don't know what you guys have experienced before in the miraculous, but I know that there have been a number of times where I or other people I've known have encountered truly miraculous things, and it plays games with you. Like when it's happening, you're just blown away and you're just like, oh my gosh, you know, this is so incredible. How could anyone ever deny this? And then within a very short amount of time, you start like questioning yourself and you're like, did I really see that? Like, did that really happen, or did something happen and I just made that up in my mind? Because it's so bizarre and it doesn't fit with what we experience in the world, that a lot of times it's just really hard to reconcile it in your own mind until your own mind begins to dismiss it, you know? And I've seen that happen time and time again. And you know, I've gotten to the point where when I'm around other people and something miraculous happens, I warn them and I say, you need to know that in a matter of, you know, a week or so, you're going to start wondering whether or not this has happened, you know? And you're going to start to question it, you know, and just know that that's probably going to happen, and that's okay, you know, but it really did happen. You know?
Don't be shocked. Don't be shocked.
But I mean, I can imagine, you know, that they're in this situation, and even though all these amazing things have happened, you know, because it's so far out of what our minds are used to, our minds just have a hard time and start to reject it. We try to, and I think potentially in this day and age, we're even worse at it than what they would be, because we're so into, you know, scientific evidence for everything and whatever. So, oh.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Tim? Do you think that?
I agree. I agree that not just miraculous things, but you're right. In miraculous, you start to question it, and then you start to form another story in your mind, another alternate explanation sometimes of why this could have happened. And then in some senses, you can almost deny the very influence of God, you know, because you've now made a way in your own mind for this to have occurred outside of God's power. And and that's a human thing to do, but a little bit beyond that, I listened to something that was fascinating a while back, and it was just talking about memories and how we have the opinion that, like, I can tell you what I did with Dan Stern, you know, yesterday. I can count the campfire, you know, or whatever. I can tell you that. But what's funny is when you actually have like a video recording of it and then someone's actual memory, those two things rarely actually align as much as we think they are. We might only be like 20% accurate. It's astounding how bad we are with memory. And so I think that plays into how we have a very low opinion of miraculous things that happen in our life, because we just don't remember them as well as they actually happen, the significance of them. And then it's easy to explain them away when you're only remembering 20% of what the actual thing was.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think a lot of times we play it really hard on people of the Bible for the reactions.
He thinks.
That's just because we don't understand. We haven't experienced that or encountered it ourselves.
Yep. Yeah. You think 10 plagues would change your mind, but difficult. One thing I talked about let's see here. It's end of 13, end of 13. What it says that when they went, the people, God led. See, it's 13 verse 18. God led the people around by the desert toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went out of Egypt armed for battle. I think that's interesting that God actually said they were armed for battle, but yet he didn't want them to encounter the Philistines. And I'm trying to figure out what sense does this phrase mean in context. He wants us to avoid war, but yet it says in the NIV, God led the people around by the desert toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt armed for battle. And that's not what they did. They do it later.
Dan, where does it say he specifically wanted them to avoid the Philistines?
Well, no, it doesn't specifically say it, but it says that God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country. So commentators have said that if you go through the Philistine country, you're probably going to encounter war. But it doesn't say it. You're right, Jacqueline. It doesn't say don't, you know, he just gives them a different way, even though if they went the Philistine way, it would have been a shorter way. That's what it says in Exodus. Or let's see, verse 17.
But maybe that wasn't his purpose in the first place. Maybe it wasn't about going to the promised land immediately. Maybe he knew and recognized that he needed to take them, you know, because what was it? One of the Jewish teachers that I listened to said that God recognized that before he gave the people their freedom and the promised land, that he had to break the slave mentality from them.
Yeah.
And so the wilderness is about breaking off the slave mentality. So he can't take them directly there, because if he does, you know, then you have people with a slave mentality entering in, and then what do? You know, they're going to kowtow to the Philistines.
Yeah.
So, you know, he had to break that off of them.
Yeah, no kidding. And it says in 17, when they did encounter the Amalekites, they nailed the Amalekites. They were ready for battle. So I just wondering, if I had a spear and I carried the spear the whole time, you know, and it just doesn't make much sense to arm their departure. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't make much sense. But you're right, Jacqueline. In the end, who knows? Why are we arming ourselves when we're trying to run and get out of Egypt? That's all. It's pretty interesting. They eventually they encounter war. There's no doubt. So
yeah, but also the Amalekites are a totally different beast than the Philistines. You know, I mean, the Philistines are the sons of Anak, so they're the giants. You know, where
they're the
Amalekites are just, you know, you and I.
Hey, I'm a good fighter. Jeez, probably not, but I could fight.
You're no giant.
I could fight. Yeah, well, I know I'm not Dutch, but you know, there's no doubt. So, but what's interesting too, Jacqueline, that I studied is clearly the Israelites got their instruments of their weaponry from someone, and they're always alluding to the fact that the military overtones, they got it from Egypt. So I'm wondering how, you know what I'm saying? I'm wondering how they got their weapons. That's all. It's interesting. You know, when you read it, you're like, why do they need weapons? They're running from Pharaoh. Well, they should encounter some things. They had 1 million people there. Sheesh. So, yeah. Good stuff.
Well, I mean,
so
back
they
in
get into the Red
times,
Sea.
anytime you traveled, didn't you need weapons? I mean, just because travel was not a safe thing.
Absolutely. Nehemiah needed him to build a wall.
Yeah, I mean,
Nehemiah couldn't even build a wall. You know? No, you're right. You don't know if someone's gonna. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly it. So
I mean, you have all kinds of roving bands, and you have people that recognize that these are main trade routes in and out of Egypt, which is one of the wealthiest things of the world right now. You know, so I mean, there's got to be tons of traders. There's got to be lots of robbers and people who want to take advantage of people.
A lot of pirates. Yep, I call them pirates because that's what's at sea, right? You just get pirates.
Yeah, they're just land pirates.
Pillage. They pillage. Yeah, land pirates. You know, I don't know what they call raiders. So yeah. Anything else, guys?
One of the things
it still takes me back when
if you got to the end of that, after they fight the Amalekites, one thing that stuck out is that he says, "Write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of anyone under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, "The Lord is my banner," saying, "A hand upon the throne." There's the hand again. The hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will have Amalek from generation to generation. And I think there's probably a lot there I'm missing, you know, but there's a reason he wanted them to fight the Amalekites. Like he's pretty clear. He wanted to utterly blot out the memory from under heaven. Like, I mean, and he wanted them to write that down and remember that. So there was some serious, like, vengeance going on, that God was like, I'm going to take these people out. Like, they have gone against me in a way that they deserve something terrible. Like, I mean, you have to think about, like, what did the Amalekites do? Like, you know, I mean, they had a specific thing coming from the hand of God saying, I'm going to wipe the memory of you out. That's your people. Like, no one will even know you existed. Like, that's some serious vengeance right there.
Well, and aren't they the ones that later on that God actually tells them in the law that until, again, this is an everlasting ordinance, that if you ever see an Amalekite from now till the end of the world, that you are
Smite
to
them.
immediately slaughter them. I think that's it, because there is a people group that he says that about. He says, if you see anyone who's an Amalekite between now and the end of the world, you are
Good
to
grief.
slaughter them immediately.
Wow. Yeah,
How
that's
on earth
yeah,
do you
yeah.
know that we're seeing an Amalekite right now? I have no idea, but
Yeah. I'm not sure if I want to do my descendants tree. I don't want to do ancestry.com, see if I'm an Amalekite. Jeez.
yeah.
There's not much said in Genesis about Amalekites. Amalekites are mentioned in Genesis 14, but they attacked all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites. So it is interesting if you read about it. That's a good, Tim. That's a good study, because what the heck did they do, you know?
And maybe
So,
it's because they're
who
at
put the
the
B in their
Rephidim.
bonnet?
You know, if you think about it, they're camping at
It
Rephidim,
could be. Yeah.
and Rephidim
Yeah.
is one of the fallen angels. That's one of the descendants of the Nephilim. So maybe they are also connected with that. But
Related to Lucifer.
well, to the fallen
Yeah,
angel,
that's interesting.
not necessarily Lucifer himself.
To the fallen
but-
angel. Yeah, that's true. That wouldn't be considered. Yeah, that wouldn't be a
Well,
descendant.
one
Yeah,
of
but
the
you're right.
fallen angels was Raphael, and he is one of the people who. There's also an archangel named Raphael, but one of the fallen angels mentioned in the book of Enoch is Raphael, and it says the Rephidim came from him. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's but that's heavy though, Tim. You're right. Wow, put the hammer down, God. Woo.
I mean, he doesn't forget. You know, like in Deuteronomy, it goes on and more. It says, remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, and cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you, and he did not fear God. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your enemies around you, in the land the Lord your God is giving you for inheritance to possess, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. I mean, that, like, it's double again. Like, he's like, this person, Amalek, and the Amalekites, right? They came after you when you were weak and weary, and the God of the universe was leading you through the wilderness, and he did not fear God. And he's like, maybe that's why, because they just did not fear God. And he said, I don't know, like, but there's a specific thing that there's more there than I'm aware of, but it's mentioned enough times with enough force that it says, you shall not forget.
Yeah, no gray area. Yeah. Well, Amalekites did not make it in the Ten Commandments, you know, smite all Amalekites. They could have. we get the point, Yahweh. We get the point. We're with you. So, no doubt. Anything else that, I mean, unless we forget. So when you get through 14, the Red Sea crossing, I always like the fact that I keep getting the word pursued. I was circling some words, how the Egyptians pursued. And I also like the fact that Moses says things like, don't be afraid, stand still, see the salvation of the Lord. Like, he's going to redeem you. Would you just, and in fact, I think the original language I was reading is like, shut up, sit still, shut up. And they were whining. Isn't it enough? We would have been better to be slaves again. And, that we should die in the wilderness. So like I said, should we go be slaves or die in the wilderness? You give us no choices here. And I love, like you said, Tim, earlier, there was zero choices. You were to be obedient and to listen and stand still and shut up. Did you guys catch in verse 19? It says, and the angel of God who went before the camp. Did you catch that piece too? That's something that I noticed. That's new. I mean, I didn't catch the angel of God. Rod, did you catch that part?
Yeah, I was curious about that because back when they're crossing the sea at 20, it says, by day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way. By night, a pillar of fire to give them light so they could travel day or night. And then when you get up, then it says that it's the angel of God. So is God and the angel of God the same being?
Yeah.
Everything I've read.
Yeah, because I would say it's associated. Isn't that the Lord himself? So,
Yeah, it's supposed to be Jesus.
Yeah, it always says Jesus, from what I understand.
is that what you guys get this too? Is the Lord Himself, right? That's Jesus.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
shows up at. Okay, all right. I thought I was off on that. Okay.
Yeah. When we get into other places, you're going to see there's a lot of times, this is something I discovered as reading through the Bible myself many times in the past, is that there's a lot of times where it says that he came down and is wandering through the land preaching or talking to people or prophesying or just seeing how things are going. Like he shows up a lot
Right.
in the Old Testament.
More than you think, right, Jacqueline? Like it's unbelievable.
Oh, way more, way more.
That's cool.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's
that'll-
times
that'll
where
be
people, I
fun.
think, wonder, do people possibly know, no one could have known Christ prior to his, coming in the New Testament. But I think a lot of people knew Christ prior to him coming in the New Testament.
Well, I mean, just
Yeah.
think about the burning bush for a second, right? Moses is looking at the burning bush. Now, we have in scripture where it says that no man has seen God, the Father God.
Right.
We have that.
Yes.
But he obviously saw the burning bush. So who is he seeing in the burning bush? It has to be Jesus.
Who?
There's no other explanation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah,
was the fourth man in the fiery furnace?
It's Jesus.
yeah, Jesus. And he's all over the
I mean,
place.
is
He
that
comes to
Jesus?
talk
Yeah,
to
that's Jesus.
Samson's
That's.
parents.
I mean, we can. Doesn't say. Samson's parents. Yeah.
Yeah, Samson's parents.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because that's one of the ones that really convinced me that it must have been Jesus, because, he accepts an offering of worship, and we know angels will not do that. Angels won't let you worship them. So the fact
Yeah.
that he accepts
they're not
a
allowed.
worship offering.
Yeah. I love how stealthily God is too. And you said it, Rod. It was a cloud and darkness to the Egyptians, but on the other side it was a light to the Israelites so they could keep moving. So on one side there's an LED, on the other side there's total pitch darkness because they can't see what's going on. Is that what you're saying, right? Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you wonder how he actually figured that out, but he's obviously able. I also like the part when verse 25, he took off their chariot wheels so that they drove with difficulty. Now that's straight out of a movie right there. The wheels fall, the lug nuts come off the wheels. What the heck? What is it, Dukes of Hazzard? I mean, seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be difficult to drive. It's like a cartoon. You can't drive with no wheels, right? So I just think that's God being, bring it. Let's go. Those are interesting things.
It all goes back to the fact that God is going to ensure that he is glorified. And the only way for him to be glorified is for him to be miraculous and overwhelming in force in this scenario. And that's at the end of the day, like he's not going to be bested by Pharaoh, right? He's not going to, even if they want to go back to slavery, that's not happening.
Yeah.
He's not going to
No,
be
I know.
if that happens. So he will ensure that he is glorified in all things.
Yeah, absolutely. So the chariots and horsemen. I don't know. I was reading a few commentaries. It's interesting how they had to wait till morning to seal the deal, though. God could have done it that night. And it says, now it came to pass, because it said in the night watch. It says in the night watch, which is still, 3 a.m., 4 a.m.? But in verse 24, it came to pass in the morning. Watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar and cloud. I just think it's also one of those details that we don't usually see is he waited. He wanted to see the whites of their eyes before he did this. And then in 26, stretch out your hand that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians. So it is like you said, Tim, it's the rest of the story. It's the end of the movie, game over. And the foolishness of the Egyptians and the fleeing of the people and the chaos ensuing. I can't even imagine 1 million people trying to cross something. I can't even imagine 50,000 people crossing through Lapeer in one day. And it probably happens more than I know, but imagine 1 million people walking. Aren't they walking? They're not on horseback.
Right. Yeah. Walking on dry land.
And walking on dry land, you know. So yeah, interesting stuff.
I know that a lot of you guys
Now-
weren't here last week, but one of the things that I had talked
I
about.
listened to some of it.
Okay. It was at the very end. I made a comment that.
Oh, I might not have got that. Yeah.
Okay. So some of the messianic rabbinical teachers talk about how there is such a massive correlation between the story of the Exodus and the book of Revelation, and how you see things, patterns repeated again and again and again. And they call the Exodus, the lesser Exodus, and Revelation, the greater Exodus. And they say that the book of Exodus was given as a guidepost on how to survive the end times. And it's a very interesting concept when you
That's
start to look
interesting.
at it like that, of the things that God does to judge the earth
Yeah.
in the time of Revelation is reminiscent of what he does in Exodus, you know, and the ways that he protects his people in the book of Revelation is reminiscent of what he does to protect his people in the book of Revelation, you know. And so they talk about, and they say that
Yeah.
the Bible says, you know, actually I think it's in Matthew, that Jesus says that you will not finish going through all the towns of Israel before the Lord's return. And the number of stops that they make in the number of camps that they have is equal to the number of towns in Israel.
Wow.
And so they said, and so like one of the rabbinical teachers, he was like, you need to understand the names of each thing, because it's going to give you a signpost of what you're going to experience, you know, that you're going to have, you know, a time like Mara, where, you know, you experience bitterness, you know, and so what is, you know, so being prepared when you come into that, that time, you know, to be prepared for what is going to be the bitterness. Something's going to come up that's going to be bitterness to you, and learning not to complain, to hold your tongue, you know, or, you know, different things that happen. So it makes it fascinating to look back and forth between the two. And I think it's something that most people don't know about or recognize.
That's interesting.
Fascinating.
And actually, one of the guys, one of the rabbinical teachers I talked about said, well, we can probably guess, just because of knowing how God does things, that the 3 months of darkness is probably going to start on the plague of darkness, on the anniversary of the plague of darkness, you know, or things like that, because God has a tendency to repeat concepts like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes sense with what that story we read, where it literally points out that when they left Egypt, it was 430 years, not just like roughly, it was to the day. Like it was from the day they were there to 430 years later. Boom.
On that day, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, God does that so much. Yeah. Like every time that the temple has been destroyed, it's always been destroyed on the exact same calendar day in the Jewish calendar.
But everybody's shocked when it happens.
Well, you know, it's,
I can't believe we did this.
And obviously, you know, the Romans and the Babylonians aren't looking to, you know, repeat history, but they managed to do it, you know. And then I think the Stillnacht to the I'm trying to remember the name of it, the Night of Broken Glass, where they ended up gathering up all the Jews in Germany to take them into the Holocaust. That happened on that same night. And, you know, just tragedy befalls Israel on that day regularly, you know.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, there's I forgot to mention to you guys, I was studying a little bit about the Passover, the significance of the Passover. That was the thing that caught me the most this week, is the Passover. but the contemporary significance of the ritual that we have called the Lord's Supper, and how that's a ritual. And you were saying, Jacqueline, earlier, that do we still hold on to something from Torah? Not really, but we hold on to what Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. Didn't he, in fact, say the same thing in Genesis chapter 13 or Exodus? Doesn't he just say the same thing? Is that what you're saying, Jacqueline? He already says that. He says that more than once, actually.
Yeah.
This is an everlasting
ordinance. And what's really cool
and Jesus then says, do this in remembrance of me.
Yeah, and what's really cool in the Passover is, because if you follow the things that it talks about, you can find out what part of the Passover he's doing different things during, and when he gets to, taking the bread and breaking it, that bread, is, there's 3 pieces of bread. They're in a napkin, representing Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They take out the middle one, the Son. It's a pierced bread.
Yep.
And they break it in half, and they take one half and they hide it. They take a 3-folded napkin and they hide it in the 3rd fold, hidden in a tomb for the 3rd day. And the name of it is Afikomen. The same words, that it is finished. That's what Jesus would have said on the cross. It is finished, Afikomen. And they hide that. And when they find it again and bring it out, then they have to pay, the people who wanted to get it back have to pay a king's reward, a king's ransom for, because he's the value of a king, and just there's so many things with that. Or the cup of wine, that particular wine is called the blood of the Lamb. That cup is called I think it's the 3rd cup, it's the blood of the Lamb. And it's just, there's so many things that are just phenomenal.
What was that, Ron?
That's all part of what the Catholic
parallels
communion service is. Do this in remember of me. Do this in remembrance of me. They break the bread, take the cup. But for some reason, I think, and I should remember better, but for some reason, I thought that they celebrate the Passover, that the Catholic Church does. But I'd have to ask my mom, because I can't remember exactly what they do. But it's not like this. But I remember something about that. But no, that's all part of like the communion service, and when they consecrate the host, because again, it's according to the Catholic Church, it's actually the body of Christ when you eat it. Like there's Eucharistic miracles that that show that it's
transubstantiation.
Yeah. So
like I said, and Rod, that's good. Yeah.
That's where it's kind of interesting, because growing up,
I think that's like, part of if I could.
But yeah, that's all part of. But the Passover, I can't remember what I'll have to ask her and see. But one question I did have about.
You should.
I noticed on the Exodus. Did you find it interesting that so after the Passover and they kill all the firstborns, and they say that the wailing in Egypt, and then it gets to the Exodus where during the night Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites, go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go." And then after that he says, "And also bless me." So
little backhand blessing there.
Too. After all of this all this has happened, you can finally go take all my slaves, but
bless me.
Also, can you do me?
Bless me.
I just thought it was interesting. So is that like, in a way, if it wasn't for
do me a solid.
That's
awesome.
You know what happens next? It's almost like makes you wonder if it's Pharaoh admitting that, like, I now realize that
what he's done.
God's God.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting.
And I'm not.
And I was wondering if they did actually go ahead and bless it.
I don't know. It does, Jacqueline, it doesn't say, does it? It does not say.
Was it a blessing like the blessing for the czar May the Lord bless and keep the czar far away from us.
Or
Jeez.
maybe he meant that
No, but Jacqueline, he doesn't say worship me. So
maybe the blessing is getting these people away from him, that there would finally, all the trouble would stop for him.
yeah.
Maybe that's what he meant.
Well, he lost his son. The thing is, Rob, remember he had just lost his son that night. Right?
Yeah.
My son is dead. He's not going to tell nobody, but can you bless me? Because I just went through some tragedy. You know what I mean? I don't want to tell you because I'm kind of like God, but I'm going through some grief here right now. So that's a good point. Bless me. Yeah, that's cool, man. I wanted to comment about the ritual of the Passover to the ritual of the Lord's Supper. I think the rituals, and Jacqueline, you might chime in on this, is I think reading Torah and going through the Passover, and I know you've done the Seder before, Jacqueline. I think there's some deep, deep things that we can teach future generations, because that's the point of this whole thing. It was, well, what struck me about this too, I want to mention about the Passover, and this is what I'm going to do with my boys. He actually says to, doesn't he say on the regulations? He says, so it is when your son asks you in time, what is this? You shall say, by the strength of the hand of the Lord, you brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So I like that because it says, what do I say to my son? That's actually pretty pertinent for me. When they ask why the firstborn were killed and why we celebrate the Passover, he actually gives them the answer. This is what you tell them. So I think it's important. So I know the Christian church right now is heavily involved. I also studied the fact that if the Passover is once a year, Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. Why do we do it every Sunday or every month? That to me is a pattern that the evangelical church, I think the church has began. Because if you think of Passover is not celebrated twice a year, is it? So if we're going to, the parallels are not the same. I mean, they're obviously not the same, but like you said, Jacqueline, the significances are unbelievable. The parallels are unbelievable. So I just think that early church fathers and the argument about Luther having it all the time and Calvin having it less significantly time, and then some churches having it a lot less times, and then Catholic churches, Rod, don't they do it every Sunday, every Saturday, every Mass? So
yeah,
so
but that's,
yeah.
That's part of the whole church service that drives you to. I mean, I think they tie it.
I don't know if that's every church though. I don't know.
But the Catholic Church ties it in with the Sabbath. Is keeping holy of the Sabbath is also taking communion every Sabbath, every Sunday. But also, I mean, they have weekly
every time you would
they have daily church services, so they'll take communion every day they go to church. But
every day.
Mass requires.
So it is okay.
Mass requires that you have communion. If it's a mass, it has communion. If it doesn't have communion, it's, I don't know. Yeah. It's a service, but if it's called a mass.
Yeah, what do they call it?
I think it's a service because, like, Good Friday. I think I'm trying to think. I think it's Good Friday. They do not have communion. Is that right, Rod? You remember?
I believe so, and that has to do with that. If I remember correctly, that has to do with the Passover and unleavened bread, and that's why they don't have communion.
Yeah, because from the Passover, from his death until Easter, they don't do communion.
Yeah.
To honor that Christ was dead and in the grave, and and then they celebrate it again. Because then they have Easter Vigil, which is a service that doesn't have communion, so it's not mass.
Yeah, that has 12,000 readings. That's a that's a long deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Some of it's like, for me, I wasn't like the greatest Catholic in the world, but I mean, I grew up Catholic and I went to church all the time. But it's like, I guess like what Tim was saying about memory. It's like I've forgotten stuff from high school that I knew in high school. So I've forgotten plenty of stuff about the Catholic Church and why it is the way that it is. But there's definitely a lot of stuff that the Catholic Church does.
Yeah, well, they hang on to tradition.
Yeah.
They are in.
Yeah.
tradition is one
They
of
do.
their major
They
things.
really do.
And
Yeah.
it's a requirement that you honor tradition in the Catholic Church.
Yes, and that's where like the holy days and stuff. It's
Mhm.
like I said, there is a lot to it.
Mm-hmm. And so I was just saying, I was raised in more of a ritualistic church, and Jacqueline, you know what tradition I'm from, but I hold fast to that now. Paul says hold fast these traditions. I do. I think they're important, but it almost seems like the more contemporary church I get into, there's literally no rituals, but now the contemporary church creates their own ritual. So I don't know where to go. As a newer believer, I remember going, wait, is this a ritual or something I just want to do?
Yeah.
No, this is just to get 20 somethings in there. Okay. This isn't what God wanted. This is just to get more people in the seats. So that for me, that's a hard piece that I've learned in the last 20 years of being a Christian is, wow, we've really set some new boundaries that aren't even in the 66 books. They're not even in here.
Yeah.
So
But
And
that's
yet
a sidebar.
throwing out ones that are in it.
I think it makes church more appealing to
Yeah,
people.
we have.
Dan.
Yeah,
It's
there's no doubt.
you have good worship music and
Yep.
a lot less stuff that you have to, you don't have to remember a holy day of obligation to make sure that you go to church on that day.
Right. There's no doubt. Yep.
So,
And the other thing that I think it's made me sometimes, I get atrophy to some of the muscles that I think the Holy Spirit needs me to actually activate that I don't activate.
Yeah.
interesting.
Anyways, comments before we get back in the swimming pool. I mean, get back to my campsite. I mean, get to the bonfire. Come on, you guys are all doing a bonfire tonight. Jeez, that's what you're doing, right? There's the last. There's bitters of water made sweet. That story's incredible. More complaining by the people. There's no food, and there's the introduction of manna, which you guys probably found, the coriander seed, which tasted like wafers made with honey. You know what I think God just threw out there every morning? Donuts. Let's just be honest. God put donuts on them, And I don't know if they're fritters, if they're like Boston creams. You know what I mean? I just think he did that. He just puts donuts on the ground. So.
To my knowledge, that's not what coriander tastes like.
How do you know? I think coriander tastes like donuts.
No, if you taste it, coriander does not taste like donuts.
Is it like cinnamon? It's got to at least be like cinnamon, right?
No, it's I don't know.
What's it taste like, Jody?
It has more of a peppery type.
Yeah, it's
Connect.
Oh, I'm out. If it's like ginger, I'm out. Ugh. Can't do ginger, man.
it tastes like stink bug smell.
Yeah.
Oh my word, Jody. Wow. Okay. Wow. Let's not even read that verse. Woo. That's where. Well, if you look in, that's awesome. That's enough. Yeah. That's going on Twitter. So Exodus 16:26 says, 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day of the Sabbath there will be none. And that's the section where he does bring up, remember the Sabbath day. Tomorrow is a Sabbath. Make that a holy day to the Lord. And I think that's sweet. I love that. I love that part. When they were pleading and they didn't know what to do and they were complaining against Moses and Aaron. Did you guys notice sometimes they complained and then Moses and Aaron responded, and sometimes just Moses? Most of the time just Moses, but a lot of times Aaron got his. You ever notice that, how he kind of got in there too? Moses and Aaron spoke to God.
Mhm.
Then sometimes they didn't speak to God. Sometimes they used the staff. Sometimes they used their hand. I catch a lot of the stuff. Touch your stick to the rock. Do this, do that. So yeah, there is. Oh, and yeah, we didn't even get. I mean, Tim already alluded to the victory over the Amalekites, but that kind of ends our section for the week. So there is a lot of there. There was a lot to this week's reading. I know it was like 6 chapters, but it seemed like there's just, I could fine tune this stuff for the next 6 weeks. There's so much in there. I don't know. Did you guys feel that way too? Like I can go back through the 10th plague and the Passover and the wilderness way and the Red Sea crossing and the manna. I can read that again. So.
Yeah, I feel like
I'll read it to my
Exodus
kids.
has a ton of information.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jacqueline. So, absolutely. Well, is there anything else for the good of the cause that we want to bring up before we sign off for the evening, guys? Anybody? Okay. Good. It was good being with you guys. Oh, did you have something, Jacqueline? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't. I just was agreeing with you.
Well, yeah, man, I tell you, I really enjoyed this, and I apologize for the KOA Wi-Fi. I hope it actually worked. I mean, you heard me sometimes. I was very concerned, Jody, for quite a few hours today. So, not knowing if this would work. So, and it worked. So, anyways, well, let me pray, and then we'll go to the bonfire. What's that? What did you say?
I said you weren't the only one concerned.
I mean, you know, I'm not going to say what I was thinking about all day, but I kept painting so I wouldn't have to worry about Wi-Fi. Thank you, God, for this study. Thank you, Lord, for the word that always comes alive and is so relevant in our hearts and minds. I pray, Holy Spirit, that you would continue to stir things up in us, that our affections would be for you and you only, and that you would be Lord of our life and Savior in our life, that nothing else really matters. So we love you, Lord. We pray for Pastor Rick, who's gone on a trip right now. Keep him safe and his family safe. And until we meet again next week, I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks, gang.
Amen.
Yep.
Thanks, gang, for the awesome. We'll see you guys soon.
Yep. Have fun camping, Dan.
Have a s'more on me, Rod.
Yeah. You'll have to go make one.